Good morning, students. This is Asha Singh, your social science teacher. First of all, I would like to welcome you to your new class, grade 7. Now you all are in grade 7. And I hope you all are excited about this new session. I know this new session has not as you all expected, but you don't have to worry about it. We will not let your studies hamper. We will be sending you video lectures and assignment through your Google Classroom. So, before we start, I would like to give you a brief introduction about social science and the kind of books which we will be following. In grade 7, social science will be following NCERT books, and there are 3 books, one for history, one for geography, and one for civics. Your history book name is Our Past, Volume 2. In grade 6 you had Our Past, Volume 1, and geography book is Our Environment, and civics it's Social and Political Life, Part 2. So altogether 3 books which we'll be doing. And today we are going to start with the chapter 1 in history, and the name of the chapter is Tracing the Changes Through Past. And I would like to inform you, on 25th of March I have already sent a PDF format of chapter 1 in history in your Google Classroom. So if you want, you can read the chapter through as well. And before we start, I would like to give you a brief introduction about history. As we all know, history is study of past events, right? That's what history is. And to make it easier, what we do, we divide history into periods. The 2 broad classification of history which we generally do is prehistory and history. So the prehistory is that part of history for which we find no or very little written evidences, and the post-history is the part of history for which there are lot of written evidences available. So prehistory is categorized as Paleolithic, Mesolithic and Neolithic. That's which you studied in grade 6. And the post-history is further divided into ancient, medieval and modern. Ancient history is something which you studied in grade 6. The grade 6 history was from prehistoric period till 7th century, right? That was the ancient period. And your medieval history is from 8th to 18th century, which you will be studying in grade 7. And the modern history is the history which you will be studying in grade 8. So, medieval history is the one which is of our importance, which we are going to study in grade 7. So, this medieval history is further divided into 2 parts. One is early medieval period and the second is later medieval period. The early medieval period is from 8th to 13th century, whereas later medieval period is from 13th century to 18th century, right? That's a brief introduction about medieval history. Now, as the name of the chapter suggests, tracing the changes through past. So in this chapter, we'll try to trace out the changes which took place in medieval period, right? So first we'll start with maps. There were a lot of changes in map. So here is a picture of a map by Arab geographer Al-Idrisi. Can you identify the map is of which region? It's a bit confusing, but if you take a closer look, this island country looked like Sri Lanka, and this looked like the southern or the peninsular region of India. But the problem is it is shown in north. Sri Lanka is towards the south of India. But if you turn this map into upside down, it will look like a map of India, especially this portion. So that's the speciality of Al-Adrasi. Al-Adrasi was a famous geographer and he prepared a lot of maps. But there was one uniqueness in his maps. They were upside down. His north pole was south and south pole was north. So in case if you have to study his map, you have to turn around the map and then study. The next map which you see here is a map by French cartographer in 1720. So this is quite similar to nowadays. Now here you can see this region is India and this is Sri Lanka. Both the maps are of medieval period. One was of 12th century, the other is of 17th century. But you can see a great difference in maps. So that's the changes came in map drawing also. So children, I said French cartographer. I hope you all know what exactly is cartographer. Cartographer is a person who specializes in a field of map making. So here you can see, but one thing is common in Al-Adrasi map and this French cartographer map. They have the names like Kannauj, Delhi. They all are similar names in both the maps. And children, I hope you all know what is collection of maps called? It is called atlas. And do you know why it is called atlas? There's an interesting story about it. There was one traveler who specialized in art of map making. He prepared one book of maps prepared by him, and on the cover of that book he pasted a picture of Greek god Atlas holding earth on his shoulder. Since then, all the collection of maps is being called as Atlas. Atlas is actually a name of a Greek god whose picture he pasted in his map book. So since then, all the books of map are called atlas. So now let's move on to the next topic. Changes in new and old terminology. Right? So there are few words which have a specific meaning nowadays, but in past that particular word had a different meaning. In the same way, here we are going to study a word Hindustan, which had a different meaning by different people. One is Menajesiras, who was a 13th century chronicler. So children, do you know who is a chronicler? Chronicler is a person who writes chronicles. And what are chronicles? Chronicles are events of history written in a form in which they occurred. So chronicler is a person who writes the history events the way they have occurred. So Menajesiras was a chronicler, and in his book he used a term Hindustan. But when he used a term Hindustan, he meant different. According to him, Hindustan was the areas of Punjab, Haryana and the lands between Ganga and Yamuna. That's the northern portion. For him, the area of Punjab, Haryana, Ganga, Yamuna was Hindustan. And he used the term Hindustan in political sense in medieval period. And again, the next person whom we are going to discuss here is Babur. Babur used the term Hindustan in medieval period in a different sense. He referred word Hindustan for the flora, fauna and the culture of this particular region. He used the word Hindustan term for a region where that particular type of flora and fauna was found, particular type of language and people were there. It was in cultural sense, not in political sense. The same way Amir Khusro also uses a word Hindustan in his writing, but he uses for that particular area culture and literature. And today when we use a term Hindustan, what does it has a meaning? It is the political sense, and the boundary of India is what we actually have right now, from Kashmir to Kanyakumari and from Gujarat to Arunachal Pradesh. The whole of India is Hindustan, whereas when Ajay Siraj spoke about Hindustan as only the northern portion, which was under the control of Delhi Sultans. In the same way, the word Hindustan had a different meaning for different people, and the Babur used the term Hindustan in his autobiography Tuzake Babari. In that we see a lot of time he has used a word Hindustan, but it's for the in a geographical sense. The second word or the term which we see here is the term Pardesi or the foreigner, right? In past, the foreigner was a person who was new to that particular area or a culture. A stranger who was not a part of society or a culture was a foreigner or a Pardesi. But nowadays, foreigner means someone who is not from India. In past, if a person from Madhya Pradesh go to Delhi, he was Pardesi for that region. So foreigner, they used to use a term Pardesi. Even a people from a same country, if you move in a different region, they were called Pardesi. Whereas nowadays, if we use a term Pardesi, it is for foreign national or the people who is from a different country. So we have studied two types of changes. One, the changes in map. The second, the changes in terminologies. Now, the next thing which we are going to study today is history and their sources. The way we study history and the sources. So, broadly we classify the source of history in two categories. One is archaeological sources and second is literary sources. Archaeological sources contains architecture, forts, tombs, temples and paintings and evidences, coins, and the literary sources include letters, teaching of saints, manuscripts, petition, judicial order, like rulers used to issue farmans, and holy text. Lot of in medieval period, especially in the later medieval period, we do get lot of literary sources. And children, do you know how come we get so much of literary sources altogether? Is the invention of paper. By the end of 12th century, paper was invented, and we see a sudden spurge in literary sources in 12th century when there was invention of paper. Holy texts like Quran, Mahabharata, Ramayana, all these things also give us an account of history. Chronicles of rulers. Rulers employed court poets to write their chronicles, when they were born, when they fought first battle, when they got married, when they had child. All these things were written by the chronicler in the chronicles. And teaching of saints. Yes, the Bhakti movement started somewhere in between medieval periods. So teaching of saints or the biographies of these saints were called hagiographies. So we do get a lot of hagiographies which gives us insight information of this period. So children, let's do a recap what we studied today. We did a brief introduction of history. We studied about ancient period, medieval period and modern period, division of history into past, pre and post history, and then we studied about maps, how they changed. Then we studied about the terminologies and the sources of history. Tomorrow in the next lecture we'll study in detail more about manuscripts. Okay, that's all for now. Thank you.